Full Metal Jacket is a 1987 Stanley Kubrick movie about US soldiers preparing to fight and then fighting the war on Vietnam. It's a movie with many themes, such as the whole Jungian thing,
And the Jungian thing, sir.
and we're not going to look at all those themes here. I'm going to assume you've seen the film before, so there will be spoilers. But if you haven't, and you can stomach a bit of violence and a bunch of racism, go check it out. By the way, there will be a bit of violence and racial slurs from the movie in this video, just so you know. If you haven't watched my video on the state, now might be a good time. In fact, there are several videos in the description that'll help you understand this video, but you can also understand it on its own. Full Metal Jacket strips away the propaganda and shows you what the state really is at its core. The state, you see, is a hierarchical social institution established through conquest for the purpose of concentrating power. It establishes hierarchical organizations that answer to it, like the police and the military, and it uses them to impose its will on everyone on the land the state claims as its jurisdiction. The state doesn't ask. It assumes its power and authority without consent. If you don't conform to its laws, however much they go against your interests, you get punished. The state needs enforcers. So right from a young age, the state trains you in martial values like sitting still, being quiet, following orders, and fearing authority. It expects everyone to go through the discipline training of school, and then after school to remain beaten down and so continue to labor and follow the rules. The state demands conformity at every stage of your life. You do what they tell you until they tell you to stop.
Go, Private, go! Quickly! Get your fat ass over there, Private Pile! Oh, that's right, Private Pile! Don't make any fucking effort to get up to the top of the fucking obstacle!
You think the way they want you to think, or else it gets beaten into you.
What side was that, Private Pile?
Sir, left side, sir!
Are you sure, Private Pile?
Sir, yes, sir!
What side was that, Private Pile?
Sir, right side, sir!
Don't fuck with me again, Pile!
To simplify the complexities of the war on Vietnam for just a minute, the simplest way to see the conflict is the US government, like the Japanese and French governments before it, wanted Indochina to fall in line with its dictates, like opening up markets for foreign corporations. And it didn't. So the US used its foreign policy enforcement arm, the military. The US foreign policy establishment wanted to impose its will on an entire part of the world, because that's what it does every day. It's the same state telling kids in school what to do and punishing them for not doing it. They just don't need the military to stop kids rebelling in isolation. The state's demand for behavioral and ideological conformity is most important among its agents. Civilians might be allowed to hold marches and wave signs, however ineffectual that may be. If soldiers were allowed to think for themselves, or dissent from the program they're part of, they might question the war. After all, most soldiers don't want war. Imperial troops like these usually have no idea why the war is going on at all. They get told it's for their country, to keep people safe or make them free, but no one starts wars for any of those reasons. That's just propaganda. But the troops don't know anything about that.
I mean, we're getting killed for these people and they don't even appreciate it. They think it's a big joke.
And they don't really care since there's nothing they can do about it anyway.
Do I think America belongs in Vietnam? I don't know. I belong in Vietnam. I'll tell you that.
So instead of focusing on ends, they focus on means. Take this exchange between two soldiers looking at their dead comrades.
Well, at least they died for a good cause.
What cause was that?
Freedom?
Flush out your hit, you new guy. You think we waste scoops for freedom? This is a slaughter. If I'm gonna get my balls blown off for a word, my word is poontang.
There's no big picture. They just want to kill and survive and get laid when they can. Sergeant Hartman encourages this mentality. Remember this scene?
Do any of you people know who Charles Whitman was? None of you dumbasses knows. Private Cowboy.
Sir, he was that guy who shot all those people from that tower in Austin, Texas, sir.
That's affirmative. Charles Whitman killed 12 people from a 28-story observation tower at the University of Texas, from distances of up to 400 yards. Anybody know who Lee Harvey Oswald was? Private Snowball.
Sir, he shot Kennedy, sir.
That's right. And do you know how far away he was?
Sir, it was pretty far from that book suppository building, sir.
All right, knock it off. 250 feet. He was 250 feet away and shooting at a moving target. Oswald got off 3 rounds with an old Italian bolt-action rifle in only 6 seconds and scored 2 hits, including a headshot. Do any of you people know where these individuals learned how to shoot? Private Joker.
Sir, in the Marines, sir.
In the Marines. Outstanding. Those individuals showed what one motivated Marine and his rifle can do. And before you ladies leave my island, you will all be able to do the same thing.
Hartman is talking about people who killed Americans. They're not supposed to care about Vietnamese people. They're the enemy, right? But they're supposedly fighting for Americans. Hartman is basically telling them this is the kind of person they can expect to become. But for now, just against the Vietnamese. And of course, they do.
Get some! Get some! Get some! Get some! Get some! Come on! Get it! Come on! Get some! Get some! Yeah! 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 I got you, brother.
For the Marine Corps, there's no goal, no end. They're just means of war. States are in the business of taking away freedom. You and I don't have much freedom in a state society to begin with, but at least we can laugh and cry and speak and get scared. Well, after work, anyway. The troops give up their every freedom to the state. First, they either accept the propaganda or else conscription, rather than go to jail, so they give up their meager civilian freedoms to live under the direct and total control of the state. Then they fall in line with every order given to them. Every minute of their time is accounted for. What if you deviate from the rules? Physical and emotional punishment, including collective punishment.
So, from now on, whenever Private Pyle fucks up, I will not punish him. I will punish all of you.
They're being broken down, physically and emotionally. Their training is designed to destroy their instincts to run from danger, or to see the enemy as humans only defending themselves, or to think about the war as an act of mass murder. In fact, the troops are so inured to the system, they take it upon themselves to attack the biggest victim of this control. If they attack the person actually punishing them, they would face further punishment, so they don't even think about it. Leonard, who they're beating up, is just a kid. And that point really hits home at the end of this scene when he's crying in pain.
Ow! Ow!
In a different time and place, that would have been you. This devolution of violence is quite typical. In a class system, violence trickles down. Someone is frustrated and angry, but they don't understand why, and they take it out on those nearest them. With a little imagination, you can see how absurd this whole situation is. You have a huge number of young people with guns who could easily rebel against their officers. After all, why would they want to go all the way to Vietnam to kill people they have nothing against? Why wouldn't they say no and defend their answers with the guns they're given? Well, lots of possible reasons, but one of them is they live under a totalitarian system. They can't get together to have secret meetings to plan an uprising. And because of the constant propaganda they face,
I love working for Uncle Sam. I love working for Uncle Sam.
it probably never crosses their minds. That's why Leonard kills himself. There's no other way out. And of course, this situation reflects the modern United States pretty well. Millions of people have guns, but everyone's so indoctrinated they can't figure out who the enemy is. Because the real enemy is constantly providing them with fake enemies. They're loyal to the institutions that oppress them because, well, they've been told to. And there's no obvious way out for them either. Even Sergeant Hartman has no freedom. He has power, because the state empowers him with enough authority to command trainees, so he has power over them. Power, in political terms, means the capacity for violence, including a sufficiently credible threat of violence that intimidates people into complying. Individuals have very little power until they sit in a seat of power. Because in a seat of power you get enforcers like the police and the military to force people to comply. Sergeant Hartman effectively has the power of life or death over these boys because, in effect, he's backed by the entire enforcement apparatus of the state. So how did this situation come about? A few high-ranking White House and military officials working for rich business interests decided they would escalate the war against Vietnamese independence. Politicians implemented conscription, which is forcing people to join the military, so it's a kind of slavery. Most states throughout history have engaged in or at least legalized some kind of slavery, so it was hardly unprecedented by the 1960s. Police enforced conscription, and the Sergeant Hartmans of the world turned teenagers into tools of war. So Gunny has a measure of power, but he has no freedom. He couldn't deviate from what's expected of him, even if he weren't already fully indoctrinated. Power is always devolved from the top of the hierarchy to the next rung down. Just like someone higher up deputized Hartman, Hartman deputizes Joker, making him squad leader. I find it an interesting part of the movie because Joker is playing good cop to Hartman's bad cop. Leonard is still stuck there, still forced to follow the plan. But now he has a softer enforcer. It doesn't change his situation, just makes things easier to bear. It doesn't mean Joker is the good part of the system. There is no good in this system. It's coercive from the generals to the squad leaders. Every agent of the state is like a cop, because they can get other cops to enforce their orders. Joker is a good cop, but he's still a cop. The troops are no longer individuals.
You want to be different?
Sir, no, sir!
They're just cogs in the machine. The state is a system of power, and as a system, it necessarily treats people this way. Perhaps the line that best encapsulates how the state sees people is at the beginning.
Here you are all equally worthless.
You might think of yourself as an individual, but everything that defines you as such gets taken from you. From your hair, and your clothes, to your name.
What's your name, scumbag?
Sir, Private Brown, sir!
Bullshit, from now on you're Private Snowball.
To speaking in unison. To any impulse you felt like pursuing. You have no relationships.
You're married to this piece, this weapon of iron and wood, and you will be faithful.
You're stripped of your individuality and consumed by the group. You have nothing left except a group affiliation and an ability to kill, because that's all the state needs from you. Any individuality might make you a less than perfect killing machine. As part of manufacturing heartless killing machines, the military indoctrinates its soldiers. And nothing's more important to indoctrination than dehumanizing the other. All states need an other, some person or group at which the people can direct their rage. By its nature, the state forces people to work and follow all of its laws, and that makes people angry. But states realized a long time ago, if you can control people's minds with propaganda, they have a much harder time understanding what's making them angry. So the propaganda might say, Mexican people are stealing your jobs, or the Chinese government is spying on you, or Vietnamese people want communism, so you learn to hate them, to think about them as an undifferentiated mass with a few unpleasant traits, and it doesn't matter if some of them die. And that's how a ruling class creates the other. Moreover, state or imperial propaganda has always called its realm a bastion of civilization, education, art, freedom, and all these other wonderful sounding things, while the enemy is said to hate all those good things.
They stand for everything we don't stand for.
All means of indoctrination are employed to make the troops believe.
Chaplain Charlie will tell you about how the free world will conquer communism with the aid of God and a few Marines. God has a hard-on for Marines.
That's why these troops are so confused.
You know what really pisses me off about these people?
What?
We're supposed to be helping them and they shit all over us every chance they get. I just can't feature that.
They were assured they'd be welcomed as liberators, as they always are. I'm not sure why Rafterman was confused, though. He works for the propaganda department of the war. He knows you're supposed to sex up reports.
Joker, I've told you we run two basic stories here. Grunts who give half their pay to buy Gook's toothbrushes and deodorants, winning of hearts and minds, okay? And combat action that results in a kill, winning the war.
It even says on a banner on the wall in the control room, we will defend to the death our right to be misinformed. They know what they're doing. They know it has nothing to do with truth. States exist to plunder and control people. The invasion of Vietnam was an example of both. You can see from the Pentagon Papers the importance of Vietnam's natural resources to the planners of the war, along with the belief that it was up to them to keep Vietnam from falling to what they called communism. There's more than one way of dehumanizing the other, and we see some of them in Full Metal Jacket. Dehumanizing the enemy makes it easy or even fun to kill them. Racism is a big part of dehumanization, and racial slurs always seem to be an outcome of it, and we're going to show some of them here, so trigger warning.
Every zipper heading north and south will be banging gongs, barking at the moon, and visiting his dead relatives.
Anyone who runs is a VC. Anyone who stands still is a well-disciplined VC.
We are here to help the Vietnamese because inside every gook there is an American trying to get out.
We even see the switch to a new euphemism.
Search and destroy. We have a new directive from MAF on this. In the future, in place of search and destroy, substitute the phrase sweep and clear. Sweep and clear, got it?
So it doesn't sound as bloody. The movie shows us this dehumanization has worked. It's Vietnam, yet we hardly see any Vietnamese people. There's a couple of hookers, a dead soldier, and a bunch of farmers we can't see for their hats. And of course, that's the genius of Kubrick.
Even in shots where we see Vietnamese people, we usually don't get to see their faces. That's because this movie is from the GI's point of view, and GIs were not supposed to see civilians as individuals.
When you dehumanize, the enemy becomes a faceless mass of people who all follow a couple of stereotypes.
It's not until Joker actually sees a girl get killed and die in front of him that we really see someone, and that's because it's part of his journey as a character.
Some people's analysis of this movie, or of war itself, leads them to say that boot camp is where soldiers first learn to follow orders, dehumanize the enemy, and kill without too much guilt. However, their indoctrination began 12 years earlier, when they started school. In school, they learn to believe they have countries, and they live under a democracy, and they have enemies called communists, and the US military fights for freedom. But just as importantly as all that nonsense, they were primed for believing in authority, following rules and orders, and receiving punishments. Only a tiny minority thought to question or rebel. Most urges to stick up for themselves and fight back had been disciplined out of them years ago by parents and teachers.
What is so different between this opening scene and most people's first day of school?
Probably fewer personal insults at school, at least nowadays. But the structure's the same. The kids have no power, the authorities have all the power. You can't leave. You have to follow every order, however pointless.
From now on, you will speak only when spoken to.
The state drills the rules into you so effectively that by 18 you don't even think of breaking them, no matter how abusive authority gets.
Are you through grinning?
Sorry, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you!
Sorry, yes, sir.
While an important movie, another problem Full Metal Jacket reflects is, from our perspective, the war on Vietnam is all about Americans and how it affected them. Why is it always about Americans?
Not only will America come to your country and kill all your people, but what's worse, I think, is that they'll come back 20 years later and make a movie about how killing your people made their soldiers feel sad. Oh, boo-hoo.
There are a bunch of excellent movies about the war, and yet how many can you name that are by Vietnamese directors or show a Vietnamese point of view? The closest I can think of is Platoon, where at least they showed normal people and how terrified they were living under US occupation. So, what could the troops have done differently? Again, nothing easily, since they would have to be forced to go to war. But as many of the troops learned, when you have others who agree with you, you can fight back. First, they rejected the draft. They refused to be enslaved to fight people they had no beef with. They held sit-ins and blockades on roads and in their universities, on the steps of the Pentagon, at draft induction centers, and railroad tracks that were transporting troops. And they burned their draft cards. In 1967, 50,000 protesters descended on the Pentagon. Around 1966, the troops started to mutiny. In June, 3 privates refused to go to Vietnam. More soldiers refused to go or refused to do their jobs or comply with orders. Soldiers began to desert in ever higher numbers and put out anti-war and anti-military newspapers. They got punished wherever they could, of course. But the tide began to turn against the military brass. Soon they were killing their officers, burning buildings, and sabotaging vehicles. Now, I think it's important to point out the main reason the war ended most likely was because the Vietnamese resistance was ultimately unstoppable. But at least some Americans did their part to end the war also. And they still could, to stop today's wars. In fact, a sufficiently militant movement of mass non-compliance that presents a threat to the status quo could stop wars, abolish police, and free prisoners. So, what are we waiting for?